Welcome to the Look Good, Move Well podcast.
Hey Satya, what's up?
What's up, Marcus?
We like the blue theme we have going on today?
I love when we color coordinate and we don't even plan it.
I know. I would say that this is the only thing that I have like currently in my wardrobe that's like sort of nice-ish looking. So I've been wearing it out for sure, but you always have something new and fantastic on.
I love clothes.
Yeah. And in this work from home culture, it's hard to go and show them off.
I don't have many places to wear them, so I save the good shit for the podcast.
Right on.
Where everyone's just going to be listening to me, and like only a small percentage of people watch on YouTube.
Nice. We were asked to really bring back the FBB banter by a listener, and so here's the banter topic. As I'm over here manipulating the temperature of my coffee in my mug through my phone, what is the gadget app, piece of technology that is like, over the top and probably should never have been brought to life, but you love and you use all the time?
Oh, man. I mean, I just think, side note, but I just think it's really funny, like how many things we can control from our phone now.
Oh my God, yeah. I was like, we were at Halloween the other day and we are like walking through the neighborhood and this guy's like, oh, let me just open my garage. And he like pulled out his phone and like I saw his house open. I'm like, what?
Yeah.
He's like, I'm going to lock it down. I'm like, he's like closing his garage, locking his front door. I'm like, okay, this is weird.
Yeah. I think the ones that are, I guess people find them useful. The ones that are kind of creepy are like the doorbell cam type things. I mean, I guess it's useful, but I would say over the top is probably like the pet cam, which I don't currently have right now because I don't have a pet. But if I did have a pet and I left it at home all day, I would 100% be spying on my dog like all day long.
Right on.
Yeah.
Okay, so you dodged the question. You didn't actually talk about something
because
that you do use.
I try not to get too wrapped up in technology.
Right.
But I will say, like, the one that I do use a ton that I don't think is over the top is Duolingo. I'm obsessed.
Right on.
Yeah.
Yeah, you talk about that all the time.
I know.
Right.
I never let it go.
Okay.
Yeah.
Sweet. Well, I was referring to the Ember mug that I have my coffee in, and it controls the temperature of your coffee as it sits on the counter. And I felt like it was a little bit cooler than I wanted it, so I just opened up the app, repaired, and now we're up at 138 on our way to 144. That's the goal, target. Or actually, I'm stick it at 140. That's kind of yummy.
Yeah,
that's what
this is clearly over the top.
Yeah. So, as I wait, 140, I'll take a sip, a dramatic sip.
Okay.
Oh, it's so much better when it's a little warmer. Today we're going to be talking about nutrition. It's going to be kind of a nutrition roundtable. We got a few topics to dive into. We got questions from a couple different people through direct message. This morning, in fact, as I was in the sauna, I got a question about keto diet, ketogenic, long-term keto. Hey, I thought you had done a podcast on, the potential downsides of long-term ketogenic diets. Like, I can't seem to find it. I was like, well, I don't know if we actually did it. So, today's a good day to kind of capture that within the topics that we're going to cover on nutrition.
Yeah, and we'd had another one of keto and intermittent fasting.
Keto, intermittent fasting.
Benefits, drawbacks.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Anything else we want to like add on to the table for nutrition?
I think that is a good start for us, and we'll probably pick up some topics along the way.
Okay.
And side note again, but I love how people are like listening to the podcast coming out on Friday, and then they're like, oh, I got to DM them a topic because I get all the topics on Fridays now.
Oh, you do?
Yeah.
Sweet.
Yeah.
All right. Yeah.
Love
Keep those coming in. Everybody that's sending in messages, DMs, that's the best way to get us podcast topics. We have a running list that we just keep sharing with each other. So Thank you. Now, before I get into anything that is modestly scientific, Satya, what do you see as problematic with long-term keto from not that you're not scientific, but just like
layman's terms.
Layman's terms. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. What I see is that people will get good results when they're following keto very specifically, But then over time, those situations start to come up of, oh, I'm attending the birthday party, I'm attending the special event, and I want to have something that's not on the plan.
Yeah.
And it starts to become more and more an interference of things that you really just find pleasurable to eat. And so I think a lot of people have difficulties when something is neither here nor there. And with keto, it's kind of like you have to go all in to really see the benefits, as I understand it. And if you're kind of like going in and out of keto and kind of like I'm 80% keto, like it's not really gonna give you the same bang for your buck, I think. Sure.
Yeah. Interesting. One of the clients that was here this morning, he had done some bouts of keto as a tool, and it was like working for a period of time. He's very happy with the results, and then kind of stopped working, and it's like evaluating, well, what's been going on for you? What's been changing? It's like, well, I've been like pretty close to keto, but I've been having, more pasta dinners on the weekends. And so so then we're actually not in ketosis. Like that's really making now we're starting to have issue with like, well, what are you controlling for now anyway? Yeah. Okay. Any other things that you see problematic with it?
I think over time, if you are using keto as a way to give yourself some more energy and get yourself on more of a comprehensive, let's call it weight loss plan or body recomposition plan, or it's part of your training lifestyle and you're using that extra energy that you're trying to get from dialing in your nutrition to put towards the gym, I feel like you could potentially run into an issue where you don't feel as fueled for your performance without that carbohydrate intake.
Yeah. Yep. Okay. So we've got, when life actually presents challenges to following a very strict diet, in particular keto, how is that going to impact the results of keto when you're at the kid's birthday and you have a cupcake and, what does that do to you? Then are we getting adequate carbohydrates to fuel the performance that you would come to expect from, your training program that you really want, which is separate. It's separate from like the changes that you might be expecting from trying to do a fat loss approach with keto or something like that. And then let's see, anything else about intermittent fasting that you find problematic for for somebody that's following it?
Yeah, kind of a similar but different story with intermittent fasting. I think with intermittent fasting, then you can definitely run into more difficulties around your family dynamics and social situations because you're at the dinner that's past your feeding window and that kind of thing. And then also just, I think some people have great results on intermittent fasting. And for some people, it's a struggle to feel energetic at certain times if they don't have their windows, if they feel like, oh, everyone says you need this particular window. And then it ends up being I just actually like tank on that window.
Yeah, that window sucks for me.
Yeah.
Got it. Yeah. And then anything else about intermittent fasting that kind of strikes you as just odd or not workable and as you see it even in your own life or in other people's lives?
Well, one reason that I've never done intermittent fasting for myself is that I tend to undereat. And I feel like if I have restricted windows, it makes it even harder to get all the calories I need for the day in.
Yeah. And we've covered this on other podcasts, but like, there is no such thing as chronic undereating and like weight gain, right? If you're truly chronically undereating, you get really skinny and you waste away. But undereating, as you just described it, is a recipe for overeating the wrong stuff at the wrong times. So you get underfueled, you're hangry, you reach for the quickest, easiest thing, which then puts you in a calorie surplus to balance everything out. And that calorie surplus is coming from foods that might just make you physically not feel your best. And so you're kind of like, I'm underfueled, I don't feel my best. I get my calories back by overeating the wrong types of foods. That doesn't make me feel my best. So you're just like constantly feeling crappy on the same average calories, as somebody who's eating well, maintaining their body weight, but feeling energized and feeling good.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, those are really, I think that's an important thing. Like when people ask the question, they go to the experts, and I'm not positioning myself as a nutrition expert, but I have obviously a lot of experience and knowledge, and people trust me to give them some insight. But it's like, if you're asking the question, do you see anything wrong with this? Like, what do you think is wrong with cutting out carbs for the rest of your life? Does that sound good to you? What's problematic about that? Hey, you're going to skip breakfast for the rest of your life. Are you good with that? You're going to only be able to eat in this window, and you're going to have to really time it because your life is actually, not as predictable as a certain schedule. There's some people that they wake up, like their rhythms are like, I wake up at like 7 in the morning, I go for a walk, I like feed the dog, take the, whatever. And then it's 8:30, I eat breakfast. And then we have dinner at like 4:30 as a family. Yeah. And that's just their life. And that's just like very consistent. Guess what? They intermittent. They're 16 and 8. Yeah. That's like a 16 and 8 scale. Just happens to be textbook. That's what they do. Yeah. But not everyone's like that. Mm-hmm. So I just think that people can start to not trust themselves to have all the answers, but you have more answers in there than you think. Yeah. And you don't need to necessarily have science substantiate this idea of like, this doesn't feel right to me. Mm-hmm. Right? Now, there are some things that don't feel right to people, and science clearly substantiates like that's good. Mm-hmm. What's something? It's like going into the gym and lifting heavy weights. Like, if you've never done it before, like, it doesn't sound like a good time to a lot of people. If you're like inactive, if you're looking to start a fitness program, like, I don't really want to go and do like the hard, heavy thing. It's like, but science shows us, and this is absolutely positively good for you. Mm-hmm. So go do it. Let's find a way to make it work for you. Yeah. If intermittent fasting, if the data and the evidence was like, convincingly, this is the strongest, most powerful way to live and be healthy long term, and everybody that does it wins, like, okay, I could get on board with like pushing through some of the social like challenges that come with it. Similarly for ketogenic diets. Mm-hmm. But the reality is that the evidence in the scientific literature, from what I've seen, does not support like this is best case scenario for all people, and may not even be best case scenario for anybody if done for periods of time, like long periods of time, extended periods of time. Mm-hmm. What I think is a good question to ask is, why do these things work in the first place? Why do people even, why is ketogenic diet a thing, right? It wouldn't be popular. There wouldn't be hundreds and thousands of like ketogenic products on the market. Mm-hmm. There wouldn't be an industry built around it if there wasn't some efficacy there to begin with. Same thing with intermittent fasting. Mm-hmm.
And looking back to all the different diet trends that have been top hits over the years.
Yeah. Oh God, that coffee's warm. Oh, it's like steaming right now. It's what
temp are you at?
We're at 140, and it's just good. Okay. I've got like 4 sips left, so I'm just gonna really go slow. Okay. Yeah. What makes all of this stuff work? Yeah. And there are a few like resources out there and people I follow that really that do a great job. Like, their whole mission on social media and education is, let me just like, not debunk, but like, let me just break this down for you. Like, why is all this stuff working and why is all this stuff not working? And mm-hmm. at the end of the day, what matters? Yeah. And I really appreciate that very like general, let's just take a look at what's going on here. Yeah. Why do diets work? Right. Diets work because they control for the calorie variable. That's the thing that people need to control for over time if they want to have weight management. And that is why most people turn to diets in the first place, or intentionally changing the way they're eating. Now, some people will turn to diets because they are having autoimmune conditions and they want to change their inflammatory response to foods. That's a separate reason. Some people might turn towards nutrition because they want to truly just optimize performance. They're a competitive cyclist, and they need to really dial in what is the thing that's going to make me push the hardest and the fastest on the bike. I think by and large, most people gravitate towards it with the first, like, how I want to manage my my body, my composition, my weight, and my energy. And so from that perspective, and really even the performance perspective, so performance and body composition and energy, like how energetically, this is also both of these are really bucketed into like managing the caloric intake equation.
Mm-hmm.
The inflammatory autoimmune side of things, like if that's what you're aiming to manipulate, that is oftentimes more a quality food thing rather than a quantity food thing, changing up the types of foods that you're introducing to your body, because the thing that you're reacting to and what's exacerbating an inflammatory response in your body is the type of food that you're eating. It's your body's not allergic to extra calories. It's problematic, but it's not like, your immune system goes haywire because you ate an extra 5,000 calories. If you ate an extra 5,000 calories or you ate any calories from foods that your body is allergic to in some way, or it's reacting to, this can exacerbate your inflammatory condition. So again, just kind of like bucketing some big stuff here and kind of taking a step back. So why do most diets work? I said because they control for the calorie equation. Well, that's kind of really in the performance and the body composition buckets.
Mm-hmm.
And how do intermittent fasting and keto do that? Well, with keto diets, like, somebody who's eating protein, fat, and carbohydrates, they basically just cut out carbohydrates. They cut out an entire macronutrient group, and now they're just eating protein and fat. And because they're just eating protein and fat, and they're not eating this third group of macronutrients, in many cases, people just inadvertently lower their calories quite a bit. And so now you're eating much less calories, and you're in a calorie deficit, and you start losing weight. And why does it work? Why do people report that it works? Well, because when I'm eating, when I'm not eating carbohydrates, I go into ketosis. And so now my body is burning fat as fuel. It's taking fat and turning it into ketones. Well, guess what? If you're in ketosis and you give your body a ton of fat by drinking MCT oil and having tons of butter, and your body's just going to turn the butter and the MCT oil that you're eating into ketones. It's not going to turn the fat that's stored around your belly into ketones because you're eating all the calories that you need from your food. So it's really more of like, once you go into a caloric deficit, whether you're on keto or not, your body is going to need extra energy, and it can grab that energy from fat stores in your body, whether you're in ketosis or not. Some people would argue, well, it's easier when you're in ketosis for it to burn. That's, as I've seen it, not been proven. So why do some people like it? Well, another reason why people like it is because they find that problematic foods that make them want to overeat are filled with carbohydrates and fat. So by cutting out carbs, you're now taking out all the biggest offenders for most people, which is like pizza, cakes,
chips,
cookies, chips, salty, sweet, fatty, all together. Like now those are off the table. But guess what? You can also find a way around that through food science. So you cut all these things out, you're in a calorie deficit, keto's working, and then after a period of time, you start to miss your cakes and your pizzas and your cookies. And so what do? You find the keto pizza. You find the keto brownies. You find the keto cookies because they're packaged and they're at Costco and they're right there in front of you. They're keto because they don't have tons of carbohydrates, but they've got a lot of other ingredients that kind of mimic those things. So now you get that back. So guess what? You start eating those. And now you start to kind of squash this caloric deficit that you were in.
Mm-hmm.
Now you're just backfilling with other things. And so if you're not in a caloric deficit, then it's not going to work for fat loss. It works for fat loss for people because by cutting out a whole group of foods, which maybe they didn't really need in the first place. You know, like I didn't need to be eating like, 300 grams of carbs every day. I cut it out. I'm only eating 50 grams of carbs a day. It put them in a very good, caloric maintenance mode, right? So that's kind of how, keto would make sense. And then intermittent fasting, same deal. Guess what? You got breakfast, lunch, and dinner. And now you're just going to skip breakfast. So you just took out 1/3 of your diet. What does that do? It just puts you in a calorie deficit.
Mm-hmm.
And then people feel like, oh, I can eat whatever I want in the other window, in my window. And at first they don't eat whatever they want. They just eat their lunch and their dinner. And then after weeks or months, their body's now been kind of in a deficit and been deprived. And they start to have those like hunger signals and, hey, I'm hungry. And they start to make their lunch and dinner a little bit bigger. And then they start adding a mid-afternoon snack.
Mm-hmm.
And then, then one day they go out to breakfast with some friends and they add that in. And okay, so now they've just kind of, again, squashed their caloric deficit that they were in. And now their intermittent fasting isn't working anymore for fat loss. Some people feel like intermittent fasting helps them to sustain the body composition that they want, maintain, because it just helps them to organize their meals and organize their calorie intake. And that's why it's working for them. It's not some magical window of time that if I only eat for 8 hours or less, I like switch on like a fat burning tool in my body. It's not like everybody has access to that fat burning machine if they manipulate their calories correctly and they eat high quality foods and get enough protein and resistance train. It's not a special, tool that is magical.
Yeah. Okay, I want to speak to the psychological aspects of some of these choices around diets, but I just keep giggling every time we talk about keto because I literally watched you crush like 5 huge potatoes in the kitchen downstairs.
Oh yeah.
Right before we did this podcast.
Yeah. I got 150 grams of carbs just coursing through my veins right now.
He's
trying to find their way
loaded
to my quads who are desperate for something right now.
Yeah. Okay. Well, what I was going to say is that one thing that I think helps people achieve success on some of these diets has more to do with how choosing to limit yourself in very specific, easy to follow ways can make it easier to adhere to something. Mm-hmm. So it just gives you more confidence, I think, if you just say, I'm cutting out all carbs.
Yeah.
I'm cutting out all eating after 4 p.m., whatever.
Yeah.
And then I think the second thing is that a lot of these fad diets have gotten really into popular culture, I think because a trend starts and maybe there's a buzzy new book that everyone's reading and following and a celebrity follows the diet or whatever. But I think there's something really powerful about the placebo effect of being in a group, in a social sort of herd that's all following a particular diet.
Yeah.
Where it almost has less to do with the nutrition science around it and more to do with, I feel like I believe that keto is going to work for me. Therefore, it starts to work.
Yeah.
So I think that can be both helpful and it can kind of trick you when the inevitable honeymoon phase of that diet starts to wear off.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, because when you're going through any one of these approaches to manipulating your body over time, you're going to come up against some challenge. It's not going to be for most people, it's not going to be just an easy thing to just change your behaviors. So if you're in that, there's a group kind of herd mentality where you're like, oh, everyone's doing it and, they're doing it and I can do it. Like everyone must be struggling like this. Okay, I can hang in there. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. So, I mean, I kind of talked about like, well, what are some of the reasons why it might not work long term? And the other things specifically about ketogenic diets or ketosis and intermittent fasting is the intermittent fasting. So I wouldn't say I was not ketogenic, but I was mostly low carb, around 100 and less than 150 grams of carbs, some days less than 100 grams of carbs a day. So I was low carb, high fat, high protein, and I was intermittent fasting for, close to a year and a half. Mm-hmm. And what it did for me was it definitely got me, to some, like, it was a tool that I used to get very lean for a period of time. And I was probably, let's see, that was maybe the leanest I'd ever been in my life for an extended period. And I was just in a pretty severe not severe, but I was in a caloric deficit for a good chunk of that. And there came a time where I started to switch from like, okay, it's very manageable for me to be inside these parameters, to now, man, this is really hard. Like, there's days I want to have an extra meal today, but I'm really going to will it and stick to this time frame, and that's going to be my eating window, and I'm not going to budge on that. I'll just try and cram more food in the next day. But because of the nature of just how I move and my output and my metabolism from training and having more muscle mass, I would find that I was struggling to kind of meet those calorie requirements. Mm-hmm. And more importantly, I was kind of underfueling on carbohydrates. And by underfueling on carbohydrates, I was not that I was in ketosis, but because I was underfueled on carbohydrates, like, I was having a hard time retaining the right electrolyte balance in my body, mm-hmm. and I was cramping a lot.
I remember this, yeah.
Yeah. This is something that I've heard a lot from people who do long-term ketosis, is like they start to struggle with cold extremities, cramping specifically in like the like in the feet, in the calves, like in the extremities, just not having adequate carbohydrate intake, if you're an active person, if you're training, can just impact your electrolyte balance. And that becomes really uncomfortable. And for me, it became sort of like, okay, my performances started to deteriorate. I couldn't extend and push my performance in anything strength related anymore. I could keep going a bit with like my, conditioning or my aerobic output, but still, it just like I didn't have the desire to push myself super hard, because I was kind of really running on a different set of fuel that wasn't conducive to like the type of training I was trying to do. Mm-hmm. So if you're mismatched, if you're trying to do like any type of hard resistance training, you do some tough metcons each week, you like to do the, functional pump conditioning, and you're trying to go super low carb, that might not really be super aligned. Maybe if you want to go keto, but you're like, I walk and I do some body weight, exercises twice a week, like that might be more aligned, and you might find that your performance is great no matter what. Like, you never see a deficit in your performance. But if you're in the gym, pushing performance in the gym and training, then, there's a certain amount of carbohydrates that could absolutely benefit you. So that could be another reason why long-term keto or even really low carb diets might not be very optimal mm-hmm. for people. And then ultimately for me, like, I found that when I was doing intermittent fasting, I gravitated very strongly towards early time restricted feeding, which is now a buzzword that's out there, but it wasn't when I was doing this. It was like, I would wake up, have breakfast at like 6 a.m. I would have a snack at like 9 a.m. and then I would have lunch at noon, and then I was done for the day. Like, there's no more eating. So I'd fast from like 1 until 6 the next day. And that was very, very problematic when it came to like having any type of normal social engagement and interaction in life. When did I do it? I did it during like the pandemic when everyone was really locked down and at home. So, for 12 months, like we didn't go to dinner. We didn't have family, gatherings. We were just like living in our little bubble, and our girls were like, 2 and 3 months old, so like we weren't exactly sitting down to like family dinners either. It was just like feed them the, the bottle and the yogurt, and just make sure that they, get what they need. And we weren't like having these sit down dinners. So over time that just didn't really work in my lifestyle. And the reason I gravitated towards that eating window is because that was just when my appetite was like when I wanted to eat. Like when I would wake up, I just could not see myself fasting until like noon. Like, oh my gosh, like I don't know if I was going to get anything done. I would just be like sitting around thinking about food until noon.
I was going to say, I think that it's good to understand that a lot of things can work for people, and there's not a magic around any one particular method. So I think sometimes people make the choice and then feel bad about themselves if it doesn't work out for them. It's like, no, like this is just one of many approaches on the menu for arriving at the same result of consuming fewer calories than you burn and getting enough high quality nutrients to feel good in your body.
Yeah. And I think the more you realize, like, why does something work for you for a period of time and then stop working for you? It's like, well, if you arm yourself with some of this knowledge and some of these tools, like you can at least evaluate for yourself, like, yeah, for those 3 months, like I was really diligent. I really was, I had very clear boundaries, and that allowed me to stay consistent and in a calorie deficit for those 3 months. And then, things stopped because I started adding back in some of these foods, or, instead of 7 days of committed intermittent fasting, I now was doing 4 days, plus I was adding a meal back in on the other 3 days, which changed my calorie equation. And, for my client who was like, I was doing keto, but I started having some slip up days. It's like, okay, well then those slip up days were just you refeeding, and you were getting kicked out of ketosis, but it wasn't even a matter of like whether you're in ketosis or not. It was just like, you're not in a calorie deficit anymore. So there's not much more weight loss that's happening. So you can see that and then forgive yourself and be like, okay, well, it wasn't that keto didn't work. It was just that I lost my commitment to the things about keto that worked for me.
Yes.
And then you can maybe start to recreate what works in a variety of different ways, right? Like, you might find that you can actually recreate this with eating moderate amounts of carbs, but you just need to understand what portions are appropriate for you to stay in your calorie deficit. And then you don't need to be so like, you won't start to have those feelings of like, man, I'm never going to have pasta again.
Yeah.
It's like, no, you could have that pasta.
Yeah.
So I think it's definitely the season of teaching our, health and fitness consumers, like, why are these things working? Why are they not working? Because I hear a lot of people say, hey, keto's not magical, but it can work, and this is why it works. Just like that's why this works, or this works, or this works. And if you really know that, then you stop putting all of your faith into just a specific set of rules of a diet. And then you instead start putting your faith in a specific set of like laws of principles and change, right? And once we understand the principles and the laws of change, like, then we can do it our way. We can do it the way that works best for us.
Yeah. And I think it's also good to think about when something stops working, well, what's another way that could be more sustainable and also feels like I have enough clarity to know what I need to eat, what to do and not to do, without having to sit down and figure out if every single meal is going to be like okay or not okay. Like, can I eat this or that, or how much of that should I have? It's like, just get some simple rules for yourself out of any one of these approaches that can work, and figure out, hey, I know this works best for me if I just stick to like 1 potato a day, 5 potatoes a day.
Yeah.
Whatever.
Totally. Cool. Any other things to add before we say goodbye?
No. If we didn't cover some aspect of this, though, let us know and we'll do a follow-up.
Yeah. And again, send us your questions and curiosities. We'd love to answer them on the podcast.
Absolutely.
See you next time.